Assalamu alaikum and a very warm welcome back to our channel, Pakistan Zindabad, the next world superpower. This is episode 80, and today we are diving into something truly special. Our guide for this journey is the incredible research done by Mr. Zahir Ahmed Mir in his book, True Courtroom Stories. What we're about to do is trace a single powerful idea, what you might call a golden thread of justice that stretches across 500 years of history. It's a story that's going to connect a mighty Persian empire to the very foundations of law in America and right back home to us here in Pakistan. It is a fascinating, profound story about power, about principle, and about the timeless fight for a judiciary that stands independent. So you're not going to want to miss this. Let's get started.
So let's just start with this big central question. It sounds almost impossible, right? What in the world could possibly connect a judge from 16th century Persia? We're talking about a time of absolute monarchs, of shahs with life and death power, with the most important decisions made by the United States Supreme Court, and with the high-stakes legal dramas playing out in Pakistan right now, today? Well, the answer is this incredible, world-changing idea that people have fought for and even died for centuries. It's the radical notion of judicial independence.
Okay, so here's our roadmap for today. To really understand this, we're going to follow that golden thread of justice through history. We're going to start our journey way back in the Safavid Empire to see how this whole idea even began. Then get ready for a dramatic showdown, a real judge versus the king moment that put everything on the line. From there, we'll leap across the centuries and across an ocean to see how that same idea popped up in the United States. Then, we're bringing it right into the present with a modern parallel unfolding in Pakistan. And finally, we'll ask the big question, why does this one single principle matter so much?
All right, let's set the scene. Our story begins in Safavid, Persia. This was a powerhouse empire that dominated the region from the 16th to the 18th century. It was famous for its incredible art, its stunning architecture, and its formidable army. Now, this was an age of absolute monarchs, of shahs who were seen as the shadow of God on earth. Their word was law. And yet, something truly revolutionary was quietly taking root deep inside its legal system. This is the moment where that golden thread of justice was first forged.
So you have to ask yourself, how did they pull this off? In an era of all-powerful kings, how did they create space for independent justice? Well, it really came down to three key pillars. First, they created centralized courts, which meant for the first time there was a consistent, unified legal system across this massive empire. Second, they gave the jurists, the judges, real, respected authority. Their rulings mattered. And third, and this is the absolute game changer, they developed something truly unique, a scholar-king partnership.
Now, this concept of a scholar-king partnership was just so far ahead of its time. Think about it. It wasn't a written constitution like we have today, but it was a deeply ingrained understanding. The king, he ruled the state, the military, the government. But the religious and legal scholars, who were the judges of that era, they were the final word on the law. And here's the crucial part. Their authority didn't come from the king. It came from their mastery of the law and religious texts and from the deep respect they had among the people. If we put it in modern language, this was a very early, very powerful form of checks and balances. It was a system built on the idea that even the king was not above the law.
But of course, a system like this is only theory until it gets tested, right? It's one thing to say the law is supreme, but what actually happens when the most powerful man in the entire empire, the king himself, tells you to ignore the law for his benefit? Well, that test came, and it was a big one. This is where our story really gets interesting. The test case, the moment that would define everything, centered on one man, a judge, or Qadi, by the name of Mir Mohammad Baqir. His story became a legend. So here's what happened. The king saw a beautiful, lush garden that belonged to an ordinary citizen, and he wanted it. So he just issued a royal decree to seize the property. Simple as that. But the citizen, showing incredible bravery, appealed the seizure in Qadi Baqir's court. Baqir looked at the case. He examined the law, and his conclusion was clear. The king's seizure was illegal. So he did the unthinkable. He ruled against the king. Well, you can imagine the reaction. The monarch was outraged. He demanded that Baqir reverse his decision. And this was it. This was the moment of truth. Does he uphold the law and defy the most powerful man in the world, or does he obey the king and betray the very idea of justice?
Just take a look at this timeline. It really puts the scale of this whole thing into perspective. It's incredible. You've got the Baqir case in the 16th century where one judge stands firm and sets a precedent in Persia. Then you fast forward over 200 years to 1803, and the U.S. Supreme Court is facing an almost identical crisis of power in a famous case called Marbury versus Madison. And then another 200 years go by, and here we are in 2023.
And the courts in Pakistan are dealing with empowerment cases that test that very same line between the judiciary and the executive. It is the exact same fundamental conflict, just playing out in different eras, in different countries, all over the world.
Okay, so let's follow that golden thread. We're going to jump across the Atlantic Ocean now and land in the early, fragile days of the United States. This was a brand new nation trying to build a new kind of government based on this radical document, the Constitution. But there was a huge unanswered question hanging over everything. When there's a disagreement, who actually gets the final say on what the law means?
And when you put these two cases side by side, the connection is it's undeniable. It's stunning. In the Baqir case in Persia, the court question was, can a judge's ruling stand against the king's will? And the answer was yes, upholding the authority of the jurist. Now look at Marbury v. Madison. It was a complicated political fight, but it boiled down to a huge question for the Supreme Court. Can we, the court, declare a law passed by Congress and signed by the president to be unconstitutional? And the court's answer was a resounding yes. That decision established this massive power we now call judicial review. You see? They're two sides of the exact same coin. It's all about the power of the courts to act as a check on the other branches of government.
And this powerful sentence from Chief Justice John Marshall in that ruling says everything you need to know. He wrote, "It is emphatically the province and duty of the Judicial Department to say what the law is." I mean, just listen to that. With those few words, Marshall wasn't just settling one political fight. He was carving out the Supreme Court's role as the final interpreter of the Constitution. He cemented an idea that has been the absolute bedrock of American law ever since. It was, in essence, a formal declaration of the very same independence that Judge Baqir had to fight for, with nothing but his own personal courage, centuries before.
Now, what's so important to realize is that this isn't just a history lesson. This is not some ancient story about another country. That golden thread of judicial independence, it runs directly into the 21st century, and we are seeing it being tested, debated, and defended right now, today, in Pakistan. The names have changed, the political context is different, but that fundamental struggle between power and law, it's exactly the same.
So, in 2023, we saw a series of really complex and incredibly important cases, which people have started calling the judges' empowerment cases. And these cases really brought this entire issue right to the front pages in Pakistan. They all revolved around the absolute heart of judicial independence. Who gets the final say in appointing and removing senior judges? Is it a process led by the judiciary itself to keep it insulated from politics? Or can the executive branch exert its influence? These cases really probe the boundaries of power. They question the systems that are supposed to protect judges from political pressure, so that they can make impartial rulings. It was a modern-day echo of the exact same fight for institutional integrity that Judge Baqir and Chief Justice Marshall faced in their own times. So all of this brings us to the most important question of all. Why? I mean, why has this one idea, judicial independence, been so critical, so fiercely fought over for more than 500 years? Across totally different cultures, different political systems, different eras? What is it about this one principle that makes it so absolutely essential for any society that wants to call itself just?
Well, the answer really boils down to three fundamental things that every fair society needs. First, judicial independence guarantees the rule of law, not the rule of rulers. What does that mean? It means the law is king. It means everyone, from the prime minister down to the average person on the street, is subject to the same laws and judged by the same standards. Nobody is above the law. Second, it protects the rights of every single citizen. An independent court is your ultimate shield. It's the one place where an individual can stand up and challenge the power of the state and know they will get a fair hearing. And third, it ensures fair and accountable government. Because when the other branches of government know that their actions can and will be reviewed by an impartial judiciary, it forces them to be more careful, to be more responsible, and to stay within the limits of the law.
So there you have it. From a garden in 16th century Persia to the halls of the 19th century U.S. Supreme Court, all the way to the complex constitutional debates happening in 21st century Pakistan. The fight to make sure that justice is free from the influence of raw power has never, ever stopped. It is a fragile, precious legacy handed down through generations of brave judges and citizens who believed in it. And that really just leaves us with one final, critical question to think about. This 500-year-old struggle is now in our hands. Who will be the ones to protect this?
Today, we're going to dive into a story that is just fascinating. It connects a powerful 17th century Persian Empire with the very beginnings of the American Republic. Now, I know, that sounds like two completely different worlds, right? But believe it or not, they're linked by a tale of power, justice, and a legal idea so important, it's basically the backbone of modern democracy. So let's get into it. So let me start by asking you a question. It's a pretty simple one, but the answer tells you everything about a society. When a president or a king or a powerful governor decides to do something, who gets to step in and say, hang on, stop, that's not what the law allows? That very question, that challenge to authority, is what this whole explainer is about. Okay, so look at these two settings. On the one hand, you've got the mighty Safavid Empire in Iran. We're talking an ancient, powerful monarchy with a Shah at the top. And then, on the other hand, we have the brand new United States, this kind of scrappy, fledgling democracy just trying to figure itself out. They couldn't seem more different. So what on earth could possibly link them? Well, the answer is found in two incredible courtroom dramas. Our first story takes us all the way back to 17th century Iran. And this story is brought to light in a great collection called True Courtroom Stories, researched by Mr. Zahir Ahmed Mir. It's a classic underdog story, really. The powerful versus the powerless, and at the center of it all is a local judge known as a Qadi. So, let's set the scene. You have this governor, a guy with a ton of local power, who just decides to seize a widow's property. His excuse? He mumbles something about estate debts. For this widow, it's an absolute disaster. Her entire livelihood just gone, taken by someone who seems untouchable. She has nowhere else to go, so she takes her case to the local judge, a man named Qadi Baqir. Now, what this Qadi does next is just a masterclass in judicial courage. Look at these steps. He doesn't back down for a second. First, he actually summons the powerful governor to his court. Can you imagine the nerve? Then, he doesn't just suggest, he orders the property to be returned right now. And here's the absolute key, step 3. He declares the governor's action legally invalid. He's saying what you did has no basis in the law. And finally, to top it all off, he chews out the governor for abusing his power. Incredible. Well, as you can imagine, the governor was furious. He goes straight to the top, complaining directly to the Shah himself. But what the Shah does next is just stunning. He doesn't back his own guy. He sides with the law. He sends this message back, drawing a crystal clear line in the sand. He says the Qadi's job is to guard justice, the governor's job is to guard administration, and he tells him, do not confuse your roles. In that moment, he upheld the idea that the judiciary is separate and not to be messed with by the executive. Okay, now let's hit the fast forward button. We're jumping forward about 150 years and traveling thousands of miles away to the United States in 1803. It's a very young country, still working out the kinks, and a totally different kind of conflict is about to erupt, one that would also push the limits of power. So the backstory here is all about politics. You had a really bitter election. The outgoing president appoints a bunch of people to government jobs at the last minute, including a guy named William Marbury. But when the new administration comes in, they just refuse to give him the job. So Marbury sues. The case goes all the way up to the Supreme Court, and it forces them to answer a huge question. Does the court even have the authority to tell another branch of government what to do? The Supreme Court's ruling here was frankly brilliant. On the one hand, they said, yeah, Marbury totally has a right to his job. But on the other hand, they said they couldn't force the new administration to give it to him. And why not? Because they declared the very law from Congress that allowed Marbury to bring his case directly to them was unconstitutional. It violated the Constitution. And with that one clever move, they established this monumental idea. It is absolutely the job of the judiciary, and only the judiciary, to say what the law is, even if it means striking down a law passed by Congress. So there we have it. Our two stories are on the table. A local Qadi in ancient Iran and the U.S. Supreme Court in a new republic. On the surface, they seem like they're from different planets. But as we're about to see, they were both wielding the exact same kind of power. They were using the power of judicial review. So what exactly is this power that connects them both? It's called judicial review. It sounds like a complex legal term, but the core idea is actually pretty straightforward. It is the power of a court to look at any law or any action by a government official and ask one simple question. Does this violate the fundamental law of the land? And if the answer is yes, the court can strike it down. It can declare it null and void. And this is where it all clicks into place. Just look at the parallels here. It's amazing. In the Qadi Baqir case, the overreach was a governor illegally taking property. In Marbury versus Madison, it was the government acting on a law passed by Congress that was flawed. Now look at the judicial action. The Qadi declared the seizure invalid based on Sharia law. The Supreme Court declared a congressional act invalid based on the Constitution. The legal source codes were different, sure, but the fundamental principle is identical. In both cases, the judiciary stepped up and held the other branches of government accountable to a higher law. So, okay, it's a really cool historical connection, a legal principle that links 17th century Iran and 19th century America. But why does this actually matter to us, right here, right now? Well, because this idea, it is the very foundation of what we call the rule of law. Ultimately, the reason this is so important comes down to this one simple but incredibly powerful idea. Judicial review is what ensures we have a government of laws and not a government of men. It's the principle that says nobody, not a governor, not a Congress, not even a president, is above the law. It's the essential mechanism that makes sure the rules apply to everyone equally. It creates a system built on stable, predictable principles, not just the random whims of whoever happens to be in power at the moment. And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. This power, the power of a court to look a leader in the eye and say no, isn't automatic. It's not guaranteed. It depends entirely on a shared respect for the law and on the independence of our judges. So we really ought to ask ourselves, what does a society start to look like when that power fades away, when it gets weakened and there's no one left who can tell a powerful leader?
All right, let's talk about something that's been a struggle for, well, basically all of human history. The epic tug-of-war between raw political power and the rule of law. And to really get into it, we're going to be looking through the lens of lawyer Zahir Ahmed Mir and his incredible analysis in the book True Courtroom Stories. He gives us a really sharp, modern take on this ancient fight. So it really all boils down to this one simple but huge question, right? Who actually keeps power in check? Think about it for a second. When a leader or a government starts pushing the limits, who is supposed to be the one to step in and say, nope, that's too far? Who has the guts and, more importantly, the authority to do that?
Well, it turns out the answer is often hiding in plain sight, right inside the very system that's supposed to deliver justice in the first place. And that's exactly what Mr. Mir's book, True Courtroom Stories, gets into. He doesn't just give us abstract theories. He uses a major real-world event to give us a solid answer to that big question. Who holds power accountable?
Okay, so let's dive into these specifics. We're heading to Pakistan, and not way back when, but just in 2023. This is a story about a moment when the courts basically drew a line in the sand, a real test of the country's entire constitutional foundation. So, what did the Supreme Court actually do? Well, they took 3 huge and very connected steps. First, they looked at moves by other parts of the government to mess with how judges get appointed, and they just shut it down. They were basically guarding the gates to keep politics out of the courthouse. And that leads to the second point. By doing that, they sent a massive signal about judicial independence. You know, the whole idea that judges have to be free to decide cases based on the law, not because they're getting pressure from somewhere else. And finally, number 3, they really hammered home this core democratic idea of separation of powers. You've got the courts, the politicians who make the laws, and the government that carries them out, and they're all supposed to stay in their own lanes to keep each other in check. So you see, this wasn't just some small legal detail. This was the court defending the very rulebook of the country.
And look at this quote. This is directly from their ruling. It says it all, doesn't it? The judiciary stands as protector of constitutional boundaries. They're not just saying their job is to read laws. They're saying their job is to be the guardian, the protector of the lines that power is not allowed to cross. I mean, that is a seriously bold statement of who they are and what they're there to do.
Okay, so we know what the court did. But the bigger question is why? I mean, what gives a court the right to stand up to the rest of the government like that? Let's dig into the core legal idea that makes all of this possible.
Now, before we get to the principle itself, there's a fancy legal term we need to know. But don't worry, it's pretty simple. It's ratio decidendi. It's Latin and it just means the reason for the decision. It's not about the little details of the case, it's the main point, the absolute core legal reason that the whole decision is built on. Think of it like the foundation of a house.
So, here it is. This is the ratio decidendi that Mr. Mir's analysis really focuses on. Courts exist to limit power, even when power is royal. Just let that sink in for a second. This idea is so much bigger than just this one case in Pakistan. It's a timeless principle. It says that the entire reason courts exist is to be a brake on power. Any power, no matter how big or powerful or royal it thinks it is. It's an incredible statement about what justice is really for.
And this powerful legal idea, it naturally leads us to something bigger, something that goes way beyond the courtroom. It's more of a universal moral lesson, a fundamental choice that every single leader has to make. And here they are,
the two paths. It's really that simple. On one side, you have the ruler who respects the law, who listens to their judges. That leader doesn't just keep things going, they actually make their kingdom stronger, more legitimate. Then, you have the other path, the ruler who thinks they're above the law, who just overrules judges when they don't like a decision. That path, it leads to ruin. It's not even a question of if, it's just when. And this is a key takeaway from the book. This choice isn't just some legal debate. It's a choice between a stable society and total chaos.
So, we've walked through this huge case, this deep legal principle, and it's all come from one person's really sharp analysis. So it's only right we talk about the mind behind all of this.
Yep, the person who did the research and put this whole framework together is Mr. Zahir Ahmad Mir. And it makes sense, right? He's a constitutional and corporate lawyer, so he's got the perfect expertise to take this specific case from 2023 and show us how it connects to these huge, timeless ideas about law and how we govern ourselves.
So we end up right back where we started, but now we see it all a little differently, don't we? This case in Pakistan and the principles in true courtroom stories, they're not just theory. They show us that the rule of law isn't some dusty old concept. It's our shield. It's what stands between a free society and tyranny. And that leaves us with one last question to think about, a really important one. What is the real ultimate price that we all pay when power is allowed to run wild?